We're going to go through our sponsors. And then we'll get underway, all right?
Okay.
A Year of Learning by Dr. Paul Koningsberg in memory of his brother, Dr. Sam Koningsberg, Shimon Reuven ben Labish, and Ed Goldberg's cousin, Nisan Hara, Nisan ben Fardosa. Paula and Bob Bromberg in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. Malka Mann in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi. Friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov. Month of Learning by Dov Bodlander, in memory of his father, Tzvi ben Yaakov Yitzchak, his mother, Bela Devasha bas Harav Dov Bear, his father-in-law, Yehuda Tzvi ben David Nachum, and his mother-in-law, Alta Chaya bas Avram Yosef. Also a month of learning by Mel and Haran Haller, in memory of his father, Avram ben Ze'ev. Also, that is actually it for today that I have, unless the new bulletin comes out with some that we'll have to come back to. May the Neshamas have an Aliyah, Krank Rafia, Velti Yashir, Shema Talia, and L'chol B'nai Yisrael, good Gaben Shtiar.
Right.
Amen.
All right. Okay. So I did get to the top of Lamed Bet, Amud Aleph, right? And we saw that there was a statement by Rav Sheshet. Remember that there was a presumption, chazaka, that shliach oseh shlichuto. Okay, according to Rav Sheshet, it applied both to biblical as well as to rabbinic laws. Okay, and that's where we stopped yesterday. Okay, so I'm assuming that Ted and Erwin will get on shortly. They were both at the Minyan, and of course we ran a little long for Torah reading today. Okay. So what happens? Amar Rav Sheshet, says Rav Sheshet, Mina Aminala. On what basis do I say this? Okay, trying to substantiate his particular view. Okay, the Tanan is taught elsewhere in the Mishnah. Mishikarev HaOmer. Once it got close, okay, to bringing the Omer, in other words, after the bringing of the Omer, okay, then it would be permitted to eat chadash, the new grain. Hutar hachadash miyad. Then the new grain was permitted immediately. Okay? So the implication is, as we're going to see in a moment, that the Kohanim in the Beis HaMikdash one of the first things they would do in the morning, okay, at the time of the Omer, was to take care of this korban. Okay? Bar Chokim, and those who were distant, implying distant from Jerusalem, Mutarim mechatzot hayom va'elach. They were permitted to eat chadash from midday onward, because they also could assume that the Kohanim, acting as their shlichim, carried out that requirement. V'hachadash de'oraitahu. And here we see that the mitzvah of chadash is clearly a Torah-mandated mitzvah, right? Okay, and not offering it would be a transgression of the Torah. Ukatani harchokim mutarim mechatzot hayom ve'elach. And the Mishnah also teaches that those distant from Jerusalem, okay, could eat it the Chadash, from after midday onwards. Okay? Lav mishum chazakah shliach oseh shlichut. Was it not because we could say there's this presumption that the representative fulfills his mission? Okay, and that's clearly what his argument is to support Rav Sheshet's view that shlichut, that this chazaka applies to biblical aspects as well as rabbinic. For Rav Nachman, hatam kidikatani tama, and Rav Nachman is going to disagree and say that a different perspective. Hatam, he says there, kidikatani tama, when we gave the reasoning, shlafisha yod'in she'ein beit din mitatzlin bo. That's because perhaps we would argue that the Kohanim and the Beit, they're quick to perform because the Beit Din is not slow to render their decision. They don't procrastinate. Ve'ika da'amri, and there are those who say, Amar Rav Nachman, that Rav Nachman said it as follows, Mina aminala, on what basis do I say this, right? Arguing Rav Nachman against Rav Sheshet, that this chazaka applies to biblical aspects. What are we saying here, right? Namely, the katani tama lafisha yodin she'en beit din mitatzlin bo. Why? Because people have learned that the reason is that the beit din does not procrastinate, that it urges the Kohanim to take care of it right away. Beit din hu delo mitatzlin bo. It's the Beit Din that are not, don't procrastinate. Ha shaliach mitatzel bo. But who's to say that the representative does not procrastinate, that he doesn't take his time? So now Rav Sheshet wants to come back and argue again with Rav Nachman. For Rav Sheshet amarlach, he would say then the following: Beit Din ad palge dioma. Okay, that what do we say? That the Beit Din actually has up till midday, all right, to arrange for this to be carried out. Shliach kuli yoma, but the shliach, one's representative, really has the entire day. So in that regard, wouldn't it be more appropriate, let's say, that we can assume that the shliach therefore would fulfill his role? Now, Amar Rav Sheshet, Mina Aminala, again, says Rav Sheshet, on what basis do I say this? The Tanya is taught elsewhere in another Mishnah. Okay? Ha'isha sheyesh aleha leida, if a woman has given birth, and as a result, she has a obligation to bring certain korbanot, or ziva, okay, or a woman who has a ziva, okay, seen her period beyond the time, okay, mevi'ah ma'ot v'notenet b'shofar, namely that they will bring money and put it into the, I'll call it charity containers that are there at the Beis HaMikdash, okay? Knowing that therefore that money would be cleaned out first thing in the morning, okay? In order for korbanot, v'tovelet, and then she may go ahead and immerse herself, v'ochelet b'kadoshim la'erev, and therefore assume that at least by the time that the evening comes, the Kohanim will have taken that money, used it for the purchase of appropriate korbanot, okay, and therefore by that nightfall, she is able to eat kosher. My tama, what's the reasoning? Lav mishum da amrinan chazaka shliach otzeh shlichuto. Is it not because we say that we can say that there is this presumption that a representative fulfills one's mission. Now, Rav Nachman is still not happy with this, okay, as we go on and see the following, right? Rav Nachman, and according to Rav Nachman, remember, who said that it is not a biblical chazaka. You can't apply the chazaka to a biblical law, right? Hatam kid Rav Shemaya, okay? He holds like Rav Shemaya. The Amar Rav Shemaya, chazaka, ein beit din shel kohanim omdim misham ad shichlu kol ma'ot shebeshofar. That in that example of the women, okay, Rav Shemaya holds that we have a chazaka, that the court then of Kohanim sort of doesn't just stand around, right? Okay, but instead they are quick to finish up, take the money from the shofar collections, all right, and use it for the korbanot for that day. Okay. Amar Rav Sheshet. Rav Sheshet, however, again challenges Rav Nachman and says, Mina aminallah. I'll give you another example. On what basis do I say this? The Tanya, based on a Braita. Ha'omer lechavero tsev lekat lach ta'enim mita'enatai. Okay, one who says to his neighbor, his colleague, a friend, go and you may collect from my dates, let's say, figs, okay, from my fig tree. Ochel mehen arai. The person who collected it may eat from them on a temporary basis. Uma asran vadai. And the fact that they were tithed is for certain. Okay. However, if he says to the neighbor, friend, Malay lecha kalkala ze te'enim mita'enatai. Fill a basket, if you will, of figs from my figs. Ochel mehen arai. He may eat from them temporarily. Okay, casual manner, says Artswell. Uma'asran damai. But the assumption of their tithing, I'm going to say, is considered like they have not been tied, namely that they are damai. They're questionable. B'med varim amorim, what are we talking about? Ba'am ha'aretz. If the person giving the direction, the owner of the fig tree, was an am ha'aretz. Aval b'chaver, but if the person who owned the fig tree and told the neighbor to eat, or could eat, or basket, okay, was a chaver, ochel ve'eno tzarich la'aser, then the person, okay, may eat from it in a casual manner, and he doesn't have to worry about performing tithing. Divrei Rebbe. That is the view of Rebbe. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, however, is going to disagree. All right? Omer b'med varim amurim. What are we talking about here, he said? Ba'am ha'aretz. We're really talking about a situation of a common person. Aval b'chaver, but with a chaver, eino ochel ad sheyaser lafi shelo nichshadu chaverim letrom shelo min hamukaf. Okay, but in terms of if the chaver was one who owned the fig tree, okay, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is saying that that person cannot eat until, okay, it is clear that there had been tithing. Why? Because if it's a chaver, they are not suspected of making truma, of any kind of tithing, except from things that are close by. So we can't be sure by his simply saying something that it's clearly tithed. Now, Amar Rebbe, so Rebbe says, Nir'in dvarai midivrei Abba. According to Rebbe, he says, my words are more acceptable than those of father. Okay, why? Mutav sheyichashdu chavirim litrom. It is better to suspect that the chaver will go ahead and make his tithe, shalom min hamukaf, even not from the close by produce, v'lo ya'achilu la'amei ha'aretz tfeilim, and thus allow common people to eat tevel, okay, food that is not tithed whatsoever. Okay? So in other words, he is assuming that a chaver is not only strict about his own tithing, but he's strict about tithing in general, and therefore would not even allow another individual to eat untithed food. Ad kan lo plige ele damar savar nechshadu. Up to this point, it would appear that they don't disagree, namely Rebbe and Rebbe Shimon, okay, in regards to the fact that one held that you do suspect umar savar lo nechshadu, and the other held that one did not suspect. Aval kuli alma chazaka shliach oseh shlichuto. But everybody normally agrees with the presumption that a representative fulfills his mission. V'Rav Nachman hatam kiderav Chanina choza'ah. But in this case, says the Gemara, Rav Nachman there, okay, in that example, is like Rav Chanina choza'ah, right? What is he saying? Da'amar Rav Chanina choza'ah, okay, who says, Chazaka hu al chaver she'eno motzi davar she'eno mitukan mitachet yado. Okay? That Rabbi Chanina, okay, Chaza'ah, is saying as follows, okay, that basically we do have a presumption, okay, that instead that a chaver would not permit anything, right? Motzi davar would not, so to speak, extend his hand, but really that he wouldn't release anything, permit anything, okay? That is not mitukan miyado, that has not had some sort of preparation from his hand. In other words, without it having been properly tithed.
Right.
That seems the assumption. Amar Mar. So the master then says, the text continues, B'med varim amurim. Therefore, what are we talking about? That the owner of the fig tree must be Ba'am ha'aretz. A Am ha'aretz, a common person. Aval b'chaver. For if it were with a chaver, ochel ve'eno tzarich la'aser. Our text said that he could eat it and he didn't have to worry about the tithing. Divrei Rebbe. That must be the view of Rebbe, that the chaver would be concerned not only for his own tithing, but for anybody else. Hi am ha'aretz de ka'amar le. Okay, so we're saying then, this common person, okay, right, regarding him, to ka'amar le, that he said to the other, okay, to him, namely the person regarding the basket, Laman, okay, we're saying then under what circumstances could it have been? Okay, ilema de ka'amar la'am ha'aretz chavre. If we're going to say that he said it to another common person who was his friend, okay, right, the implication is ma'asrin demai, mitziat, okay, that one would have to do tithing because there's a question about whether it was tithed or not by the Am Haaretz owner. Mitziate, okay. We would then, do we listen to the instructions of saying that he has to tithe it? Ele ba'am haaretz de'ka'amar lechaver. But maybe we're talking about a situation where the owner of the fig tree is a common person, and he was talking to a chaver. Okay, maybe that's what we're saying, that that's the situation to take the basket. And that's why the Braita said that he has to do tithing. So the Gemara, excuse me, is bothered by this. Okay, let me just take a quick drink. Okay, because the Gemara then goes on and says, Ema seifa nir'im divrei mi divrei Abba. But I said at the end that my words seem preferable, right? Okay, to those of the father, to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, namely, mutav sheyichashtu chaverim etrom shalom min hamukaf va'al ya'achilu la'amei haaretz tavalim. That it's better to suspect that a chaver would borrow or would take his tithing and not do it from something close than allow a common person to eat tevel. Amei haaretz mai bai hatam. So therefore, question is, what is the common person involved here? What is he doing here? Okay, so this seems to say that at this point, okay, the one who is receiving the figs is a chaver, okay, and that for the common person, okay, it's a different situation. Okay, Amar Ravina. So Ravina wants to clarify and says, Reisha ba'am haaretz she'amar lechaver. It would seem that the beginning of the Braita spoke about the owner of the figs being an Am Haaretz and talking to the let's say basket recipient would be a chaver. Seifa b'chaver she'amar la'am haaretz. And the end of the Braita seems to be a situation where the owner of the figs is the chaver and the basket recipient is an Am Haaretz. The chaver acher shom'o, and another chaver overhears the discussion and indicates that what the status is of the figs. Namely, for the Am Haaretz recipient, he would have to, perhaps the question is whether he would have to tithe or not, but another chaver could say in the Sefer that he would not have to. Now, where do we go from here? Okay. Rebbe Savar, Oto Chaver, Ochel. Rebbe would therefore is of the impression that this second chaver, I'll call him, can eat. Ve'eno tzarich la'aser, and he doesn't have to tithe. Devadai isuri ma'aser hahu chaver kama iluve. Namely, that he can be certain that the produce is tithed, because the tithing was done by the, I'll call it, chaver fig tree owner, by the earlier chaver. Okay? V'Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, but Rabban Shimon Gamliel, however, is saying, lo yochal ad she'aser, that those figs should not be eaten until a tithe is taken. Lafi shelo nichshadu chaverim letrom shelo min hamukaf, because we have his Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's view that says we don't suspect chaverim to make a tithe from something other than what is close by. Va'amar le Rabbi, and Rabbi says, mutav sheichashdu chaverim letrom shalom min hamukaf va'al ya'achilu amei haaretz tvalim. Rebbe's view, again, as I said to him, is that it's better to suspect chaverim to do truma, okay, to do take tithing, even if it's not, so to speak, from something close by, and not allow common people to eat tevil. B'mai kemiflage. So if that's the case, what are they really arguing about? Rebbe Savar, Rebbe's of the opinion, Necha le lechaver, the la'avid hu isura kalila, velo la'avid am haaretz isura rabba. Rebbe is of the opinion that it's more, I don't want to use the word comfortable, amenable, it's easier, okay, for the chaver to perform an act which results in a minor prohibition, okay, a minor infraction, right, rather than to allow a common person to perform an act which results in a major infraction, a major prohibition. The Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Savar, Nechale lechaver, the la'avid am haaretz isura rabba. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel's view is of the view that it is more amenable, okay, comfortable, easier for a chaver to allow a common person to perform a greater infraction, ve'ihu, but he himself, the chaver, afilu isura kalila lo la'aved. He himself, even a minor infraction, doesn't permit himself to do so. Interesting difference of opinion. We could spend time discussing this in more detail, the concept, but that is the difference of opinion, and I happen to find that glad that Rebbe said he liked his view better than his father's. Okay. All right. Let's go on with a new Mishnah. Okay. The new Mishnah, okay, comes back to our issue of where we're going to place our Eruv. Okay. And I don't believe we're talking so much here about an Eruv Chatzerot, as I think it replies more to a Eruv Tchumen. Okay, I'm just suggesting that. Okay,
makes sense.
Now, we all know that if we there's a certain dimensions to define what a reshus is, right? If it's 10 tfachim, okay, if it's 4 tfachim around, things like that. So matnitin, our Mishnah starts, Natano be'ilan, okay? He put the Eruv in a tree, okay, on a branch of the tree. Lamala me'asrat tfachim, higher than 10 tfachim high, ein eruvo eruv. This is not considered a valid eruv, okay? Because if he made his residence at the bottom of the tree, right, and that's now reshus, one reshus, the tree could be in the reshus harabim, and the eruv is up there, that's a different reshus. Lamata me'asarat tfachim. If he puts it below 10 tfachim, eruvo eruv. It is then a valid eruv, right? Now, what happens? Says the Gemara, Nitano bebor. He puts the Erev into a pit. Afilu amok me'a'ama. Even if it's 100 amas deep, the pit. Eruvo Eruv. His Eruv is a valid Eruv. Now, this seems to be contradictory. Wouldn't we think normally that the 10 tfachim limit might apply here as well in the pit? Let's see. Gemara says the Talmud, Yativ Rabbi Chia bar Abba, v'Rabbi Asi, v'Rabba bar Nata. So we have three sages that were sitting together. Right? V'Yativ Rav Nachman Gabayhu, and Rav Nachman also happened to be sitting along with them. V'Yatve v'Ka'amre, and they were sitting and they were discussing, okay, this particular text. Hai ilan dekai hecha. This tree, okay, that we're talking about, where is it? Ilema dekai b'reshut hayachid. If we're saying that this tree is in a reshus hayachid, mali lemala, mali lemata. What difference does it make if the tree is in a reshus hayachid, and that's where the person is? Well, okay, what difference does it make how high it is or how low it is? Reshut hayachid ole ad l'rakia. We say that the reshus hayachid goes all the way up to him,
to the sky,
right? And so it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, the Erev then is in the same reshus as the person in either case, and it should be a valid Erev. Va'ela, but rather, the kai b'reshus harabim. Tree may be in a public domain. The mikavein l'shvot hecha. If that's the case, then his intent to rest there on Shabbos, where is he going to do so? Okay, where will he establish his Shabbos residence? Ilema d'mitkavein l'shvot lamala. If we're going to say that he's going to intend to establish his Shabbos residence up in the tree, he's got a tree house there, on a large branch or whatever, hu ve'eruvo b'makom echadhu, then he and his Erev are in the very same place. They're in one place, right? And therefore the Erev is accessible to him, and it should be again a valid Erev. Ela netkavein lishvot lamata, but rather his intent was to establish his Shabbos residence at the foot of the tree. Vaha kamishtamesh be'ilan. But if that's the case, if he tries to climb up to get his Eruv, he is utilizing the side of the tree, which is prohibited on Shabbat. So the Gemara now continues. Okay, given this situation, right? Le'olam dekai b'reshut harabim. Okay, indeed, really, we say that it must be that the tree is standing in the public domain. V'nit kavein l'shvot lamata, and his intent was to establish his Shabbos residence at the foot of the tree, at the base of the tree. V'rebihi, and this is the view based on the view of Rebbe. The Amar kol davar shehu mishum shvut, any aspect, I'm going to say, activity, okay, that is prohibited based on the issue of shvut, okay, establishing Sabbath residence for Shabbat with regards to Eruv, which is a rabbinic decree, lo gazru alav bein hashmashot, okay, it was not forbidden during the twilight period. In other words, in terms of the time that it would go into effect. Okay? So do we say that, let's say that it implies that Shabbat starts at twilight and therefore he cannot act? Or do we say, no, Shabbat doesn't start till really dark, okay? And therefore during the twilight, he could go up, climb up the tree, get the Eruv, bring it back down. Amar laho Rav Nachman. So Rav Nachman responds, okay, Yashar, right on, so to speak. You're correct. Vakena Mar Shmuel. And thus said Shmuel, Amrule, right? So Shmuel also said, right? Patritu ba kulihai. Okay? That Shmuel said, did we really analyze this completely? Okay? Inhu nami, all right, here too, right? We ask the question, okay? Hachi kapatre ba. Okay, this, did we really did he really say this to him? Did you analyze it completely? Ela hachi, but rather amrule, this is what he said to him. Kav itu le b'gemara. Did you establish this as part of the learning associated with this Mishnah? Amar laho, and he said to them, yes, we did. Itmar nami. And it was said also as follows. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel. Says Rav Nachman in the name of Shmuel. Hacha be'ilan ha'omed b'reshut harabi maskina. Here we're talking about a tree that is in the public domain. Gavoa asara. And its Eruv is 10 tfachim above. V'rachav arba'a. Okay, and the circumference, the area of the tree is 4 tfachim. Okay, so it's 4 tfachim wide, right? So it's a separate rishus. V'nitkaven l'shvot lamata, and his intent was to establish his Sabbath residence below. V'rebihi, and we're dealing with the view of Rebbe. The Amar kol davar shahu mishum shavut, who said that any activity that is associated with the Shabbos residence, a rabbinical decree, lo gazru alav bein hashmashot. They did not make that gezerah apply during the time of twilight. Amar Rava. So says Rava, lo shana ela be'ilan ha'omed chutz le'ibura shel. Rabbah adds, this was only taught in regards to a tree that stood in the arbor in the orchard that was outside of the city. Okay, it was on the outskirts of the city. Aval ilan ha'omed b'toch ibura shel. Okay, but if we say the tree was in the inner part of the city, right? Afilu lamala me'asara harei ze iruv. Then if that's the case, we can say even if the Eruv was put higher than 10 tfachim, it would still be a valid Eruv. Demata keman demalya damya. Why? Because he says here, okay, namely, that it's as if the city fills in the area, okay? Art Scroll wants to put it filled in with dirt to the top of the walls, which enclose it, rendering the entire city a whole area, okay? And makes it thus a single rishus. In other words, so long as it's within the city, okay, it's still valid. Ihachi, chutz le'ibura shel ir nami. If that's the case, then maybe even outside the city, okay, it should be a valid Eruv. Why? Kivan de Amar Rabba, Hanotain Eruvo, Yeshlo Arba Amot. Why? Because Rava says, right, one who places Eruv gains 4 amos. Havila Reshut Hayachid. Okay, and this would be considered his Reshus Hayachid. It extends, right? And what? Ureshus Hayachid ole ad l'rakia. And the Reshus Hayachid extends indefinitely up to heaven. Now, Amar Rav Yitzchak, says Rav Yitzchak, Berei de Rav Mesharshia, okay, wants to take this point and clarify it further. Okay? Says, Hacha be'ilan hanote chutz la'arba amot askina. No, we're dealing with a tree that was planted beyond 4 amos. Okay? And the branches of the tree, okay, where the Eruv was put, goes outside of the 4 amos of the, let's say, circumference, the area of the tree. That's what we're talking about. V'nitkavein l'shvot be'ikaro. But his intent, okay, was to establish his Shabbos residence, okay, at the base of the tree, by the roots. So the Gemara is going to ask, Umay lamala, umay lamata? Okay, where are we talking about when we say above or below? Gemara answers, the hadar zakif. Namely, we're saying that there is a bend in the branch of the tree. Okay, think of it like the part of the tree, the what do you call it there? Trunk, thank you. I was forgetting English. Okay, the trunk of the tree goes partially straight, then curves, okay? And right, it makes a right angle, and then curves again and goes back up straight. Okay? Look at the picture on 33A1, opposite note 6. Okay? That's an attempt of the diagram that Art Scroll shows. Corin Steinsaltz has a picture instead where it's much more, doesn't sort of branch off, but even is more a greater curve when it goes up. Okay? And that's where, okay, so that is the question, that it branches upward. Okay? And that's where we're going to stop here today, to continue tomorrow with this question. If the Eruv is placed on that, I'll call it extended branch, and that is beyond the 4 tfachim area of the tree itself, that's in a separate reshus than where he is, if he's making his Shabbos residence at the base of the tree. Okay, so how is it a viable Eruv? And that's what we're going to continue and pick up tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a great
All
day.
right, everybody.
Have a good day.
Take care. Have a
See you
good
tomorrow.
day.
God willing.
Stay well, everybody.
Have we decided yet about Slichos?
Yes. Oh, Slichas is going to be at, all right, there was a email sent out.
Oh, I didn't see the email this morning.
Yeah, late yesterday, an email that said Slichas will be at 9:30. And prior to that, the rabbi is going to give some remarks about starting about 8:40 before that, after the Zoom Havdalah. You should be able to go back and find it in your email from the shul. It came late yesterday afternoon.
And it's going to be Zoomed, the
It will
Slichos.
be Zoom as well, right?
Very good. Okay, Shkoch, thank you.
Okay, sure thing.